Yes, we'll be back from the break. It's exactly 4 minutes past 9. This is Part Means Business. I'm Andrew Barigi, and definitely today discussing matters to do with debt management. But of course, before we get further into the discussion, still grateful to all our viewers that is across Africa, that is North Africa, West Africa, South Africa, South Africa, Mozambique. So very grateful, and of course East Africa at the same time, at Horn of Africa. And for those in Uganda, Kampala, just want to reach us out. For those that are staying in Kampala, or it could be even across East Africa, come to plot 42, that is Nile Avenue, and you will be able to access us. Let's discuss matters to do with business. How can we help each other grow the businesses in that way? And you can still reach us out on our social media handles at Smart24 TV, Twitter, Smart24 TV Official, that's on Facebook, and Smart24 TV Live on YouTube. That is across, and use activity that transpires that way. Well, heading into, as we stick around onto the conversation, we need to understand that the narrative surrounding date in Uganda and indeed Africa at large is often simplistic and sensationalized. We see that the headlines scream about unsustainable burdens, predatory lenders, and impending doom at the same time regarding this. But amidst the noise, a crucial question remains answered. And of course, whereby we need to understand, does date inherently hinder development, or can it be a strategic tool for progress under the right circumstances? And of course, for this reason, I'm joined with Tumuhe Hilda. He's actually a debt expert from Siatin, Uganda, and I'm joined as we are going to be discussing more of these perspectives. Good morning, Hilda. Happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm also happy. I'm Hilda Tumuhe, as said. Good morning, dear viewers. Yes, I work with Siatin in Uganda.
Okay.
Yes.
Very beautiful. Maybe we could start with that that big question about which says that does date inherently hinder development, or it can be a strategic that is tool for progress under the right circumstances?
Well, interesting question, just as you've noted, under the rightful circumstances. Yes, actually, that can both hinder development, but as well, it can actually be a strategic tool to development, yes. Yeah. Now, I'll just expound on both the two scenarios. When you look at data as a good tool to development, I think several times we've seen, and over the years, we've actually seen Uganda progressing, accelerated growth. Before COVID, I think we were growing at about 6% per annum. Yes, but then with the global shocks and all that, it impeded growth because at a moment under COVID, we grew at about 2-point-something% of the GDP. But then we see that we are going back to that trajectory of pre-pandemic levels. Yes. But then how are we here? Definitely because probably we have the infrastructure in place, we have a favorable investment climate, yes. The private sector can also access credit, but to what extent, that is what matters. And as a just developing country, a low developed country, of course, we cannot rule out the fact that actually that we shall not depend on debt. Partly and greatly, I believe that debt has done something to our growth. The infrastructure, when you look at the infrastructure, the roads, the smooth roads, now this actually smoothens the transit, it reduces the transit time, the transportation costs and all that. But the question would be now, do we actually access the market even with these roads? Of recent, I'm seeing the upgrade of the meter grade railway, and I think this one can actually also boost trade further and also help us attain more growth. When you look at debt-funded projects in Uganda, I think from 2016-17, actually I think from 2014-15, we've seen government really borrow for infrastructure projects, yes. Of course, with an intention of boosting trade and also accelerating growth, because without infrastructure, definitely, if we have power, we have the roads, you know. Yes, so it can accelerate our growth. But the question would be now, is actually, are these projects actually helping us yield the intended growth?
That is a key aspect.
Now that would be now the question of the day, where we ask ourselves, yes, we've borrowed, we've built this whole, we've built the nice roads, but is there a return on investment? Yeah, so debt can now be actually a bad debt in the event that I've borrowed probably to construct a road, but then this road is not going to live the lifespan it is intended to live. Or I've borrowed to any example, probably electricity. There is the whole issue of the dimmed energy, whereby we are actually generating the energy, but then it cannot be evacuated to the various centers where it is needed. It means that some of these assets, even when they're in place, they are going to be stranded, and this is going to cost the taxpayers, probably because we have to pay back the debt, but then it has not generated the intended returns. So yes, we have the power, it is deemed power. We cannot evacuate it, we cannot sell it, we cannot utilize it. Yet government is paying interest on these loans, government is paying interest on these debts. Yes, the other issue would be on the stranded assets.
Stranded assets.
Yes, this really triggers my mind a lot when you look at I'll give an example of the Kabalega International Airport. Yes, this was purely built to help in the importation of the assets that are going to be used in the oil drilling and all that. But we see that the final investment decision was reached too, and many equipment have been flown into the country, but the airport is not done. What does that imply?
What does it mean?
It means that now you already have the equipment going through Entebbe, then you have to transport them to Hoima and all that, you know? So it means that in the event that it takes much longer time to come, it could be a stranded asset. Yes, we are not going to gain the revenues of the goods being flown in and all that. So it means that how can we as a government, as civil society, as citizens sit and look at the optimal feasible solutions on seeing how to utilize some of these assets. I saw the football bit. I'm not so well versed with football, but yeah, the Uganda is going to host something.
Yeah, joint host with Tanzania, Kenya.
So can we have some of those matches played in Hoima such that at least even when the goods for the oil have not been going through the airport, but at least we can gain some revenues from the airport with
That's
people.
A good idea.
Yes, so if we can have some of these matches played in Hoima, we
spread
have people,
across
across the nation.
the country.
Yeah, but for this particular airport, just because it could be a stranded asset at a point, probably in the event that it doesn't yield the intended return. So in a nutshell, that is how I can look at a good debt and a bad debt as a nation. Yes.
Now you mentioned about stranded assets. I mean, let's examine the degree of which this has actually affected Uganda's progress.
Okay. I just gave that one example. The other example, which is very popular, is the Northern Bypass.
It's a stranded asset.
No, not really stranded, but let's delve into it and think about
Let's think about it.
Have you looked at the Northern Bypass? When was it started? I'll just pose a question.
Way back, I think it stretches 20 years back.
20 years back.
Yeah.
Is that a good project or a bad project?
Now, as an expert, how would you break that down?
Okay, now when you look at this road, we see that 20 years down the road, we still see patches, we are seeing potholes, or some bits of the bypass, the metallic bits along the route have been stolen, vandalized by the citizens.
Seen some construction works that are
the maintenance, of course, and the more construction works is the expanded bit of the program, of the project. But then, when we acquire debt, to me, we need to complete the projects on time for you to be able to actually gain that return on investment. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the issue of having these projects sealed the intended purpose. Now, when you talk about maintenance of the northern bypass, do you know sometimes that this really causes disruptions along this road?
Yeah,
Sometimes
of course,
congestion, the
flow.
traffic, yes. Of course, now this could impede the transit time of the goods and whatever, but also the time lost by the various individuals that are using this road. This will necessarily affect growth in one or the other. It may not come out so direct, but in the long run, how many hours am I wasting on this road? The main reason as to why we have the northern bypass is to reduce on our transit times, to reduce the traffic in the city and all that. But now imagine each other day we have to maintain this road.
I see.
Yes. Then the other bit of the longevity of the road, really. To me, this part of Waise, I don't know how many times they have been on that part.
Working on it.
Yes, we need to interrogate the cost. How much have we put into this project, and how much are we actually gaining out of it? It is a good project if it is implemented well, I must say.
Now, because according to your discussion now, I'm trying to relate the time spent to accomplish that project. So now, what is the parameter of that, if I may ask? Because probably some projects could be worth taking all that long. And you mentioned that we should finish these projects on time. Okay. What is the actual parameter? Do you weigh the value of the asset that it should take this period of time? Because it can take 50 years, but its value can redeem those 50 years in a space of 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Now, when we look at the time taken for a project,
vis-a-vis value.
Vis-a-vis value, there are also other factors like the return of investment, like I earlier noted. There is what we call the public investment management system. This is by government. It's under the Ministry of Finance. I think they have a department, and I'm not so sure about that. But there is a report by the World Bank 2016 where they highlighted that for each dollar invested in Uganda, we only get 7 cents, 0.7 of a dollar.
We Ugandans?
Yes.
Okay.
So it means that even when we invest $1, for every project invested, say for instance, if the project costs $1, the return on investment is not even $1.
The return on investment is not even $1.
Yes, it's less than $1, 0.7.
That's not healthy business.
That's it. So they try to assess why, the reason as to why we were not actually gaining a return on investment. And they saw what was lacking was the public investment, like scrutinizing these projects before they are actually implemented. Yes, before they are actually approved and also implemented. That is what we call the public investment management system. Okay. So this is the strategy that they employed as government, and I really credit government for that, because initially we would see many projects coming into the budget, but there is no feasibility analysis that has been done on these projects.
Exactly.
We also see that there is no cost-benefit analysis, but just because probably, I don't know what drives some of these projects. I don't know if they are politically driven, or I can't really explain this, or because at least for the little time I have interacted with several government officials, I think they really have the capacity to evaluate these. So maybe the will, yes. The will. So with the public investment management system, we've seen at least an increase in the number of projects that have gone through this system, the public investment management system. So under this system, there's what we call the feasibility analysis. So you asked a question on whether we should look at the time a project to spend, because when you mentioned in your discussion, you mentioned about us accomplishing projects in time. And then I was trying to see when you mentioned the Northern Bypass 20 years and it's not a good asset, then I'm trying to understand what are the parameters that determine the period this project should be accomplished. Yes. Now, so under the feasibility analysis, by the way, like to just stress this, a good project should not take forever.
Could not take forever.
Yes, a project should have an end time, a start time, and an end time. And usually, projects should not. They should take place in the designated time. Okay. Now, if you look at the feasibility analysis, they will ask, do we have the land where the project is going to
be.
Yes. We have the money to compensate the people we are going to evict from this place. So one of the factors that has led to the delay in some of these projects, I think the Auditor General has highlighted this in a number of his reports. It is because that government is actually not ready to undertake these projects.
Okay.
Even when it may look like the Northern Bypass is a very huge project, it doesn't mean that it should actually take 20 years to get complete. No. There are many factors that have led to the delay when you look at the Mpigi Kampala Expressway. You remember the saga of the tree. Now, before you undertake a project, you should have analyzed that along this route there is actually a tree whereby the clan people are not going to allow for you to visit, to remove that tree. Now, the question should be, are we going to shift the direction of the route, which is going to be very expensive as well, or we have to negotiate with the clan members as early as enough before we actually even bring the project to Parliament. Yes, and have a discussion with the locals, because you know, we as citizens, we are not enemies of progress. Why? Because we are going to also gain from the growth. We are going to gain from the good health centers, the good schools, but above all, even the access to market for our products. Definitely. So it means that a road that is coming to my place, that is development. It's going to also. So as you start these projects, are we having preliminary discussions with the locals? How is the project going to affect the local people, both in a negative way and a positive way? So when you look at the road, the Mpigi Express, definitely it is delaying, not because it is a very big project. It was delayed a bit, but because there is a tree. So those are social aspects. So as they do as I've told you, the public investment management system, all those are put into play. So the projects go through all those phases, the feasibility analysis, the appraisal, the concept notes, and all that. So with that, I believe if this is well implemented, there's going to be a change in utilization of debt. It goes back to the first question where we were asking ourselves, can debt actually yield growth? Definitely, yes, and very true. We can actually attain growth through our debt projects.
Wow, very interesting in here. We are discussing matters to do with debt management, definitely. Of course, looking at the national level, the broader level. But later on, we shall take it back to the individual level when it comes to handling debt. Well, another interesting aspect is the interest rates. Actually, a report here terms it as a double-edged sword. This is from the Bank of Uganda and also the Financial Times. Now, interest rates are often portrayed as the villain of the debt drama. High rates were told cripple economies and enslave nations. But this is, of course, definitely the whole story. Now, a 2021 Bank of Uganda report acknowledged the burden of high interest debt, but also highlights that it can incentivize responsible borrowing and attract foreign investment. And now this brings me back to a discussion of how can nations like Uganda balance the burden and the incentive aspects of interest rates and ensure responsible borrowing to attract foreign investment. In other words, borrowing to attract foreign investment is the bigger picture in here.
Okay. Thank you. Now, when interest rates on debt, when you borrow, when an individual borrows, when a nation borrows, if I lend you my money, of course now not on a friendly basis, but business. So I expect at least to gain out of the money I've lent you. It could be an investment. So now the same applies to public debt. When we borrow as a nation, definitely these loans are going to attract interest. So as I'm paying back, I'm going to pay the principal on the debt, but I pay the interest rate. Now, the issue of interest rates, there are those lenders that lend at high rates, and there are those that lend at low rates. We have that is the concessional borrowing and then the non-concessional. But over the time, we've seen a dwindling concessional finance, whereby we see that governments are left with no option, but rather than going for the commercial borrowing, where they go to the banks, the private lenders, and any other institutions that actually are willing to lend them. Yes, but now the repercussion on this would be, we find that interest rates are going to compete with available domestic revenues.
Interest rates competing with available domestic revenues?
No, they are competing for? Yes.
Okay.
Now, you have a budget. In your budget, you're supposed to pay interest on the debt. And also you have a budget and you need to
fund it.
You need to fund social sectors. You need to fund the roads. You need to fund any other aspects of the economy. But also, you still have the interest rates that are growing day by day.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the Bank of Uganda report, I think that is the State of the Economy report for June 2023. It actually shows that domestic interest rates as a percentage of GDP has been growing, and it is at about 18%.
18%.
Yes. But now when we look at the threshold in the public debt management framework, by the way, this one expired, but before the new one comes into play, government usually refers to the old.
The old one.
Yes. So that it's still in play, though it expired in the last financial year. I think Ministry of Finance is in the process of having a new one. So the public debt management framework clearly shows us that we should not, the domestic interest payment as a percentage of GDP should not exceed 12%, 12.5%.
Okay.
But we see that ours has maintained at 18.4. Now, this is a very big margin. It's about 6-point-something percentage points. Now, when you compare, you look at this, actually the State of the Economy report clearly notes that these are crowding out the other budgetary items.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it means that government is going to go back to borrow to actually provide the social services, because the available revenues are big chunk.
Interest. I'll channel to the interest.
Not even the principal. You see,
my goodness.
on the day. So now we are using it to pay the interest payment. What does this imply? It implies that government is going to run back to borrowing. Yes. And now, as I noted earlier, the concessional finance is dwindling. It means that government is going to run back probably to the domestic market to borrow more. And of course, now this is going to crowd out the private sector.
Crowding out the private sector.
Yes. So it means that the more government is borrowing from the domestic market, the private sector credit is reducing. There is no bank that is going to prefer to lend yielder than the government. Because,
absolutely.
Yes, because government is more likely going to do what?
It will pay you back.
Yes, it will pay you back than having to run after Hilda. Now, definitely this is going to impede investment. Why? Local investment. People cannot access credit to actually invest. Okay. But then on the other hand as well, when you look at the investment climate, before these investors come to invest in now I'm looking at the external investors. Before they come to invest here, they usually assess the investment climate. They usually look at a series of factors. Yeah. Yes. Shall we have access to market? The cost of production and all those. But then also debt is usually a factor that they look at. To what extent are you indebted as a nation? Because the more you're indebted, it means that probably you're suffocating other sectors, and you cannot. Definitely, this will have an impact on the market, especially the local market. Yeah. Why? Like I've noted, people, when you're competing for the same credit with government, it implies that people cannot invest more. They will not have more money at disposal. It means that they are most likely going to demand less. Yes. So those are some of the factors how debt can impede investment. No, interest payments can impede investment. Yes.
Very beautiful, very beautiful. Well, it's exactly 9:27, and we're discussing what has to do with debt management, and quite more of interesting discussions are going to be coming up shortly, as we're going to take a break, and we shall be returning in just a few minutes. Stick around.
Smart 24, driving business.
Jovia. Ng'oyolekera ku lugendo luno olw'obulamu. Nkuwa ekirabo eky'amaanyi agatazizibwa. Amaanyi okulabibwa n'okuwulirwa mu mawanga ag'ewala ennyo. Okutuuka buli wamu nga yadde togenzeeyo. Ensi yonna ng'ekuli mu ngalo. okutambula mu biseera n'okumanya buli kimu ekirina okumanyibwa. Jovia, kino kye kirabo kyange gy'oli.
Tewali kkumo ku ki gy'osobola okukola ku mukutu nnandameggwa ogwa MTN.
Ugandans come to Ginger City every weekend, and December 16th, 2023 is Uganda's end-of-year party as Smart FM hosts the Smart Swag Fest Season 2. Don't miss performances from Uganda's top DJs, MCs and artists like the king herself, Cindy Baby, in her full band, Fig for Maker, UG Boys, Kesmon Switch, King Zamba, Waymaker Official, Voice Nasi, Zach Tom Rizla, Lance Soldier, and many more local artists. Let's meet at the Chairman's Back, next to Ginger Showgrounds. Get your early bird tickets now at 15K and at the gate 20K. Gets open from 10 a.m. till late. The Smart Swag Fest is organized by 89 Smart FM and Hot Shots. Powered by Smart 24 TV, Cisan Suits, NBS Cordeo, GZ Mechatronics, Ginger Hippos, Kampala University, Albeit Electronics and Solar Center, TMU Tubing and Rafting, Banji Uganda, Quad Biking Ginger, Cable Giants, Stardom Visuals and Audio, Bidco, and Club.
Tastefully different. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Smart 24, driving business.
Yes, exactly 26 minutes to the top of the hour. Definitely heading into the last discussion. The last minutes of the discussion today and for the show at the same time. Well, debt management, something quite very key in our country, Uganda. But of course, we've been taking a look at it from the perspective, from the broad perspective. But later on in our discussion, we shall take a look at it from the personal level, that some of these events that happen actually have a way they impact your debt management levels as an individual. My guest this morning is Hilda Tumuhe. Is a debt expert working with Siatini Uganda, and she's here to share with us some of these key aspects. And of course, we've been observing good date versus the bad date, and the aspect of interest rates offered in there, and where we saw something here to do with the interest rates being used to fund actually dates. The money that is supposed to fund the budget is actually being allocated to pay interest rates, to pay the loans and all that. But anyway, now still on that, remember we are in Africa, and we've always been into this whole aspect of not entirely economically independent in so many aspects. Now we see that the conversion around date in Africa cannot ignore the historical context of colonialism. And many African nations inherited sustainable and unsustainable debt burdens from their colonial former rulers and unfair lending at the same time. Of course, still by certain institutions which perpetuate a neo-colonial dependence. Now, the UN Conference on Trade and Development estimates that illicit capital flight from Africa amounted to an eye-watering of $88.6 billion. This is a report for 2020 alone, and now exceeding the continent's total foreign direct investment. And now this highlights the need for debt justice mechanisms and fairer global financial systems. What do you have to say about that, Hila?
Okay, interesting. That's actually very interesting. Now, when you look at I will first tap into the illicit finance.
Illicit finance. Okay, yeah, exactly.
So when you look at capital flight from Africa, like you've noted the report showing us that we are losing over 88, and that is a 2020 report. I can imagine by 2023 how much we've lost, how much more we are losing annually. Africa's continental debt is estimated at about 1.8 trillion US dollars.
1.8.
Yes, trillion US dollars.
Okay.
Now, when you compare with how much we are losing in illicit financial flows, that is about, if we are considering the 2020 report, 88 billion. Now, imagine we had mechanisms to tighten the capital flight. Like, in the event we didn't have illicit financial flows,
Exactly.
we can actually pay our debt in less than 1.5 years. Yes, you have a 1.8 trillion debt, but now you're losing 88 billion annually. So it means that if we get the 88 trillion and we clear the debt, it can clear 95% of our debt,
exactly.
or even more. So what does it imply? This calls for stringent actions as African nations. How do we tighten? Now, when you look at illicit finance, what are the mechanisms through which we lose our money? Through the tax system.
Even actually, somebody mentioned something to do with the tax holidays, the excessive.
Yes.
Well, we lose the possible taxable revenue.
The tax expenditures, whereby
tax expenditure, incentives, tax incentives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, but for this, I'm referring to. You have multilaterals here investing in our nation, and year in, year out, they are declaring losses. Okay. Is it true they are actually not
really making the losses?
Is it true they are not making profit from us? But then there is also an instance whereby you have a multilateral that is registered under another multilateral in another nation, and when it's coming to invest in your nation, Uganda, it will tell you. I'll just use an example. Hilda company in Uganda has a sister Hilda company in probably the US or the Kenya. So I come with the money, I tell you that I'm borrowing from US, Kenya to invest. Now, whatever profits I'm making, I'm paying you, Hilda, Kenya. Okay. You're getting.
Because you borrowed from them.
Now, we need to know, is it actually true that this company is not for one person? Yes. So in this, they're evading tax, they're avoiding tax. You remember the URS scenario with the Talo Heritage, where they didn't want to pay taxes. Yeah, but thank God Uganda reclaimed a huge sum of money from this. Now, those are some of the avenues through which we are losing money to nations abroad. Now, it takes us back to the debt trap, whether it is a staged trap, by stage managed by our former colonial masters and whatever. But then also there is now what we call the power struggle coming up, whereby nations' debt can be used as a tool to actually scramble and partition Africa. We are very resource rich as Africa, but why would we go back to bend low and beg in nations that actually don't have the resources we've had? Yes, there is an example that is usually given of Nigeria, how they export a lot of oil and it is just refined a few kilometers in the ocean, and then they import refined oil. Yes, and at a very expensive price. So as Africa, we need to step up our value addition mechanisms. How do we add value to our resources internally? Then we export resources that have more value, and also we export goods that can actually compete on the international market. But then there is also, I saw something of recent on the UN Convention on Tax, where they were suggesting a body tax to shift from the OECD model to the UN. Now, if this also succeeded, it would be a plus for us as Africa. Like the negotiability, negotiation, yes, and all that. So when you look at all these things, it trickles my mind to one thing. To escape this, first of all, we need to produce more. But then, even when I produce, where am I selling my products? Is Kenya willing to actually receive Ugandan products? Yet we are in the same block. Same block. Yes. Yeah. Now, how have these blocks elsewhere, the EU, how have they developed? They have market. Yes, the member states, they have market for their products. There is no way you expect us to sell goods to US, yet our neighbor Kenya cannot accept our milk. They are not accepting our eggs. The Africa Free Continental Trade Areas, we still have a number of trade barriers, borders. There's a time we are going to Senegal and they required a visa. I'm like, wow, Senegal an African nation, I'm a Ugandan, you know. So when you look at some of these things, they are those that they're really impeded growth in Africa. How can we develop as a bloc, Africa as a bloc?
As a bloc.
Yes, because I believe if we have trade, if we can boost our trade, we have access to our market for our products. Whatever we produce, we can consume. Yes, we are not going to wait for people to set for us prices, but because we can negotiate as a bloc and have a better negotiability and better terms, it means that we are going to export at more expensive terms. Okay. In this, we can be able to substitute the imports, yes, because these also affect our balance of payments, yes.
Okay. And maybe finally now, on that note, I'll start with a report here that revealed 60% of Ugandans consolidate their loans multiple times. Now we're zeroing it down to a day-to-day person in terms of debt management. Now 60% of Ugandans consolidate their loans multiple times, and it doesn't seem to be a solution, but it's rather a debt buying cycle. And 40% of the consolidated loans in Uganda default. Now, consolidation isn't a safety net, but it's rather a tightrope, which is likely to lead you to distraction. How reality is that? You mentioned something to do with rollover. Okay. Financial rollover.
Yeah, domestic debt refinancing and all that. And all the refinancing. Yeah, like you've noted, just like public debt, a number of times we've seen government in the budget showing us a huge touch. Like I think last year it's about 8.5 billion that is going to be refinanced.
Exactly.
Yes. Now we are borrowing to pay debt. Yeah. Now this also happens at household level, whereby I can borrow.
Borrow from Tom to pay Peter.
Tom to pay Peter.
That's famous phrase.
Yeah, of course. Now there are many factors that actually lead to this. It could be the indiscipline of an individual, but also when we look at the aggregate level, so for instance, many businesses that I've actually seen borrow to pay another debt, usually they have borrowed, they invest in the business, but the return on investment is not as high as they thought. Yet they borrowed at a very high interest rate.
Yeah.
Usually when you walk into the banks today, the rate of borrowing is about 20%, 25%, you know.
Huge,
so some of them now today we even have the money lenders. The interest rate can even go to 40%, 50%. So now how am I going to actually have a return on investment in this current economic time, in a period where we have high inflation rate? Yeah. You know, we have less market. People are struggling here and there to meet the demands of their families, but also then you still have to access credit. We have limited, I'm actually giving credit to government, at least for the recent years we've seen government coming up with a number of systems to support the local communities that are not in the monetary economy. We have the Myoga, these programs, the PDM. You know, these are good programs. But now the question would be on how actually we implement these to benefit the least of those at the village level. Exactly. Are they actually accessing this credit? Because there's no way I'm going to run to a money lender if I can access money through the PDM model.
PDM, yes. Absolutely.
There's no way I'm going to run to a money lender, yet I can access money through web. With the women, actually, we are enjoying the web. The youth livelihood programs, these are revolving funds at very low interest rates. So if we embrace, as locals, of course, I cannot put the blame on government fully, because I've also seen that a number of times communities fail government programs. Yeah, probably you're not from the ruling party or whatever the case. Exactly. And they have not embraced the programs, they have not tapped into them. The best solution is to just shout at these programs, they are going to gain, but at least tap into it, then it fails. Go and knock at the doors of the people giving out web money, they fail you, then you come and shout. Yes. Have you actually taken an initiative to go and look at how to access the program? But this does not mean that government has fully done their part as well.
Okay.
Yes, on the issues whereby, because we've had a number of people complaining that these programs come, when they reach the ground, probably the people implementing, the people taking lead tell you, no, you're not from NRM, you're not from this party, I cannot give you the money. So those are some of the challenges that we need to
So there is a
tackle.
political sort of...
Yes, we need to tackle as a nation to solve the issue of household debt. Because if government provides some of these accessible services, how do I access cheap credit from a microfinance institution? Yes. There is that agricultural credit facility under the Bank of Uganda, but this is being implemented through the normal microfinances and commercial banks at the local level and all that. So how do people actually access this credit? Because we've seen a number of times the credit is available in the banks, but it has not been utilized. We come at the end of the financial year, this has not actually been absorbed. So how do we have a role to play? Sensitizing the communities that there is actually access to cheap credit. Thank God for the PDM, at least there's been a lot of mindset change and also publicizing this project. So we need to publicize the project. Let the project touch the intended beneficiaries. Let them gain from it such that they can be brought to the money economy. And when they come to the money economy, instead of running to the bank, they can go to their small circle, which offers money at cheap rates. There's no reason as to why you're going to have money from, you've borrowed at 2% probably, and you just have to return the money. It means that it's going to be easy for you to pay. Absolutely. But imagine you've borrowed at 30%. You're investing in this small business. You don't have market. You can hardly access customers. It means that you're actually going to struggle paying this debt. Yes, in a nutshell, that's what I can explain about private debt.
Beautiful. Maybe just a little, in 2 minutes. What about a scenario where I have multiple people that I'm supposed to clear, 4 people, and I'm thinking of getting the magic loan that clears the 4, and I stay with this only one person?
Now, the magic loan, by the way, before any bank, unless the money lenders, I'm not so sure, but at least the banks, before they lend you, they look at your credit worth, your credit worthiness. Just like how the multilaterals, the private lenders look at our government, they will look at your debt to GDP probably, your export capacity, Now, before you get this magic bullet loan that is going to help you to solve the 4, the question would be, where are you going to get it from? You could be running to another money lender whose interest is probably even higher, and it's going to put you into a more of a debt trap as well. Yes, you could clear the 4 people, but then you've borrowed a very huge chunk of money. Because
some of them, if you borrow huge,
the small loans,
you have a chance to negotiate the interest rate to some of them. If you borrow a huge sum of money, other than these people that whom you took loans from, and the interest rate is high because you're borrowing less, you are below the line, but now you've summed it up all.
A commercial bank?
Not a commercial bank.
Okay.
It could be another financial institution. And because there was an aspect of negotiation, actually. You negotiate with these people and you get this huge loan at a lesser interest rate because of the amount you're borrowing.
But now, it also goes back to the question I raised to you earlier. I failed to pay 2 million shillings.
Yeah.
That I have money from ABCD, each is demanding me probably 2 million, 1 million, and then I run to borrow the 7 million. Yes, it could come at a lower interest rate, but which is usually not the case with debt refinancing. When you look at the national level, when you're going to refinance your debt, you're going to get, they renegotiate the terms of the debt, but usually it comes at a high interest rate.
Okay.
Yes. Why? Because the person who lent you the money also needs to make interest out of it. Now, if I'm supposed to return the money by May, then May I'm knocking the door, I'm telling you, please refinance. It means that they will want to earn more interest out of this money. Yeah. Yes, so it's not a recommended practice. Okay. So in the event that you have the money to pay, it's better to clear the debt instead of going back to refinance it. Probably now the individual people, so you
pay the 5 people, each part, in case they're 5.
Yes, it's better to look for the money and pay it back. And on a timely manner, like I emphasized.
Okay.
Yes, a loan is also a project in its own way.
Yeah.
So the project should have an end time. If we agreed May, let it be May. So it means that I have to invest this money and ensure that the return on investment is worth paying back the principal and the interest. But at the same time, I should have a profit out of that because I shouldn't just be seen in the debt trap, in the debt cycle all the time. Yes, I'm borrowing to invest, pay back the principal and the interest, but also stay with some capital to actually run my farm. So it means that the profits are my own money.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting discussion in here, and of course, just a brief report here. Debt to GDP ratio isn't the only metric, as we see that while Uganda's debt to GDP ratio is rising 49.1% as of 2021 report. Its economic growth rate 5.5 is also outpacing interest payments of 3.1%. Now, this suggests that debt is being managed responsibly and contributing to the overall progress. This is according to the World Bank report for 2023. Well, great thanks for being part of the show. For today's edition, my guest this morning has been Hilda Tumuhe from Siatin, Uganda, breaking down the matters to do with debt management. Well, till tomorrow, have yourselves a very wonderful day.